"Sir, why do you look like me?" my son asked the man in booth 7. I was at the kitchen pass when it happened, balancing 2 plates on my left arm while Rosie pushed a cup of tomato soup toward me and told me table 3 still wanted extra butter. The dinner rush at Rosie's diner was small but loud, the kind of Friday night crowd that smelled of wet coats, black coffee, fried onions, and tired people pretending they were not tired. Leo was supposed to be in the corner booth near the pie case, coloring on a paper placemat where I could see him between orders. His babysitter had canceled that afternoon, and Rosie had let me bring him in because she had a soft spot for children and a hard rule against asking too many questions. For 6 years, that was the kind of mercy I had survived on. Small favors, quiet rooms, people who did not ask why a woman with careful hands and a fake last name flinched whenever an expensive black car slowed outside. Leo was 5 years old, almost 6 if you asked him, with dark curls that never stayed brushed, serious eyes that belonged to a life I had tried to outrun, and the dangerous habit of speaking to strangers as if the world had not yet taught him what strangers could do. When I heard his voice, my first thought was only that he was bothering a customer. "Leo," I started, tired and automatic, but then the diner softened into a strange silence. Not completely. The grill still hissed. Rain still tapped against the windows. Someone's fork scraped a plate. But conversations dropped low enough that my heartbeat suddenly sounded too loud. "Do I?" a man asked. His voice was low, calm, almost amused. I did not look up yet. I reached for the coffee pot, already preparing my apology. Leo had once told a state trooper his mustache looked like a broom, and another time he had asked a woman at the counter if her baby was hiding under her shirt. Innocence was beautiful until it opened the wrong door. "Yes," Leo said, very serious. "You have my eyes." A soft laugh moved through the room. "Your eyes?" the man asked. "And my eyebrows," Leo said. "See?" I could picture him frowning to prove it. My mouth almost smiled despite myself. "Maybe you have mine," the man said. "No," Leo answered quickly. "I had them first." This time the laugh was real. Even Rosie glanced at me with that fond, embarrassed look she gave whenever my son decided the diner needed entertainment. "You look like a movie man," Leo added. "A movie man." "A handsome one." The man laughed then, quietly, as if the sound had surprised him. "And do handsome movie men usually sit in diners?" "Maybe if they are hungry," Leo said. "That seems reasonable." "But you have not eaten your pie." I was waiting. "For what?" "For my mama. She says pie before dinner makes your bones lazy." The man was silent for a second, then said, "Your mother sounds wise." "She is," Leo said proudly. "She knows songs and pancakes and when people are lying." My fingers tightened around the coffee pot. That last part came too close, to places I kept locked. "And where is this wise mother?" the man asked. "I should ask if she knows you are judging strangers' faces." I finally looked toward booth 7, but Leo had already turned away from the man and was running toward me with his red crayon in his fist, his face bright with discovery. "Mama," he said, grabbing my apron. "He looks like me. That handsome man has my face." I gave the tired, apologetic smile of a waitress whose child had interrupted a customer, and I turned toward booth 7 with the coffee pot still in my hand. Then my entire body forgot how to move. Because the man in the 7th booth was Alessio Romano, my husband, the man I had disappeared from 6 years ago, the man who had been told he could never be a father. He sat with one hand wrapped around a white diner mug he had not touched, black coat still damp at the shoulders, his dark hair slightly wet from the rain, his face sharper than memory and colder than the last time I had seen him. He was older, not by years exactly, but by whatever pain does when it learns to stand upright and wear a tailored suit. His smile was gone. His eyes had followed Leo's red crayon to me, and now he was staring at my face as if the diner had tilted beneath him. For a moment, there was no anger. That would have been easier. There was only shock, then pain so controlled it looked like silence. His gaze moved over the brown waitress uniform, the name tag that said Mira Bennett instead of Mira Romano, the cheap black shoes, the coffee burn healing on my wrist, then back to the child holding my apron. I saw the thought strike him before he spoke. He was not thinking Leo was his. He could not. The doctors had buried that possibility inside him years before I ever carried our son. He was thinking I had left him and found the one life he believed he could never give me. A child. A family. A reason never to come back. Leo leaned into my side, still pleased with himself. "Mama," I told him he has my face. I could not answer. Alessio stood slowly. No one in Rosie's diner moved. The truck driver at table 4 lowered his coffee. Rosie stopped beside the register. Even the young couple in the window booth looked up from their fries. Alessio was not shouting. He was not threatening anyone. He did not have to. Some men brought danger into a room like a gun. Alessio brought it like weather. It changed the air by existing. "Mira," he said. Just my name, not Bennett, not Waitress. Not the dead little life I had built. Mira. My real name in his mouth sounded like a key turning in a door I had nailed shut. I set the plates on the nearest table before my hands betrayed me. Leo looked between my face and the man in the booth, his smile fading because children understand fear before they understand history. "Mama," he whispered, "did I say something bad?" That almost broke me. I knelt, brushed curls from his forehead, and made my voice soft. "No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong." Alessio's jaw tightened at the word baby, but he stayed where he was. That restraint hurt more than rage. The man I remembered could silence a room with one look, but he did not take one step toward my son without permission. "Rosie," I said, forcing my voice through a throat that wanted to close. "Can Leo sit with you for a few minutes?" Rosie's eyes moved from me to Alessio and back again. Her face had gone pale, but she did not ask questions. "Of course, honey." Leo clung tighter to my apron. "Are you mad?" "No," I said. "Never." "Will the handsome man answer my question later?" I looked at Alessio before I could stop myself. His eyes were on Leo, and something in them had gone softer, not healed, not calm, but shaken. "Yes," he said quietly. "I will." Leo seemed satisfied enough to let Rosie take his hand. He walked away, still glancing over his shoulder at Alessio, and Alessio watched him go, like every step was a wound opening. When Leo was out of hearing, I turned toward the narrow hall by the kitchen. "Not here." Alessio's eyes returned to mine. "Then where?" "Storage room." He nodded once. No argument, no public scene. That was how I knew the pain had gone deep. Alessio Romano did not need to perform anger. He saved his worst feelings for rooms where no one could use them against him. I led him past the pantry shelves, past the freezer door, past the old bulletin board where Rosie kept employee schedules and Leo's crayon drawings. The storage room smelled of flour, canned tomatoes, bleach, and the cardboard boxes stacked against the wall. I closed the door. The click sounded final. Alessio stood near it, rain dark on his coat, his hands at his sides. He did not touch me. He did not reach for the door. He only looked at me. And for one terrible second, I saw the man from our wedding night, sitting at the edge of a bed he would not touch, telling me he could give me protection, a home, a name, but never a child. "Did you love him?" he asked. I stared at him. "What?" His voice stayed controlled, but his eyes did not. "The man you had the child with." The words entered me slowly. Of course, that was where his mind had gone. Alessio had been told fatherhood was impossible for him. Leo's face could hurt him, confuse him, even haunt him, but it could not yet make him hope. Hope had been surgically removed from him by a lie wearing a doctor's signature. "Alessio, no," he said softly. "Do not soften it. Not yet. I have spent 6 years imagining why you left. I imagined fear. I imagined regret. I imagined that you woke up one morning and finally saw my world clearly enough to hate it. But I did not imagine finding you in a diner with a child who looks at strangers the way you used to look at music, like the world might still answer kindly." I pressed my palms against my apron to stop them trembling. "Leo has nothing to do with this. He has everything to do with this." The words cut, but his voice did not rise. "You left me with a note asking me not to look for you. I obeyed the only part of your goodbye that sounded like a request instead of a wound. And now I find you here with a son. You did not obey right away." His face changed. "No, I did not." The admission stole a breath from me. "I looked for you until every road turned into your handwriting. Until every man I sent came, back with the same answer, gone, married perhaps, abroad perhaps, dead perhaps, free perhaps." And then Vincenzo said what everyone was too polite to say. His uncle's name tightened every muscle in my body. Alessio saw it. His eyes sharpened. What did he say? I looked away. It doesn't matter. It mattered enough to make you flinch. "You should leave." "I should have done many things," he said. "Leaving now is not one of them." I laughed once without humor, because if I did not laugh, I would cry. "You think this is still your world? You can stand in a storage room and decide what happens next?" "No," he said. "I think my wife is wearing another name. My past just pointed at me with a red crayon. And for the first time in 6 years, I do not trust the story I was given." My heart struck hard against my ribs. "What story?" Alessio took one step closer, then stopped himself. "That you wanted children. That you wanted a normal life. That you loved me, perhaps, but not enough to stay with a man who could never give you either." I shut my eyes. Vincenzo had always known where to put the knife. "Did you?" he asked. "Did I what? Leave because of what I could not give you?" The storage room blurred. Behind my eyes, I saw a bathroom of white marble, a pregnancy test trembling between my fingers, 2 pink lines appearing like a miracle, and a sentence. I saw Vincenzo Romano sitting across from me in Alessio's private office with a folder, open between us, polite hands, cold eyes. I saw a document stamped with Romano family seal, words like legitimacy review, maternal separation, bloodline protection. I heard him say, "If the child is his, he belongs to Romano blood. If he is not, you belong to scandal. Either way, you do not keep him." I opened my eyes. Alessio was watching me as if my silence had a shape. "I left," I said carefully, "because staying would have destroyed something innocent." His face tightened. "The child." "Yes, your child." I swallowed. "Yes." He looked away then, and the pain that crossed his face was so raw I almost reached for him. Almost. "And his father?" he asked. "Did he know what you were protecting?" I could have ended it there. I could have said, "You are his father." I could have watched the lie crack in his eyes and maybe, for one moment, rested from carrying it alone. But Leo was 20 feet away eating pie under Rosie's careful watch. Vincenzo was still alive. The Romano name was still a machine built to take what it considered blood. And the last time I had trusted truth to that house, truth had become evidence. "Not here," I whispered. Alessio stared at me for a long time. Then his voice dropped. "That is the second time you have said that. Because this place is the only life my son knows." And what was I supposed to know, Mira? The question hit with the weight of 6 years. I did not answer. He nodded once, as if my silence had confirmed the worst thing he could bear for now. "I will not frighten him," he said. "I will not touch him. I will not say a word to him, without you present. But I am not leaving this town until you tell me why you looked more afraid of my name than of me." I had no answer that would not tear the world open. So I opened the storage room door and walked back into the diner before my face could betray me. Leo looked up from the counter where Rosie had given him cherry pie. "Mama," he called, mouth red with filling. He said he will answer later. Alessio stood behind me in the hallway, silent as winter. I watched my son smile at him, fearless, pleased, already fond of a man he did not know had once filled my whole life. And I knew the hiding was over. It had begun 6 years earlier with music. Before Rosie's diner, before the brown uniform, before Bennett, before cheap shoes and cash tips and birthdays celebrated with grocery store cupcakes, I had been Mira Valenti, a classical pianist who played in rooms where women wore diamonds at noon and men spoke softly about money because they had enough of it to whisper. I was not rich, but I belonged near elegance. That was what my music teachers used to say. Mira makes silence sound expensive. I played charity galas, private hotel dinners, museum benefits, and the kind of weddings where the flowers cost more than my childhood apartment. My dream was simple enough to embarrass people who thought dreams should be grand. I wanted a music school for children whose parents could never afford private lessons. I had already rented a small second-floor space above a bakery in Queens, already painted one wall pale blue, already bought 3 used keyboards with sticky middle Cs. I was 26, tired, hopeful, and still foolish enough to believe talent could protect a woman if she kept her spine straight. I met Alessio Romano at a hospital charity gala in Manhattan, though I did not know who he was at first. I was playing a soft arrangement after the speeches, something gentle enough to let donors feel generous while they ignored the nurses clearing untouched plates from their tables. In the middle of the piece, almost without thinking, I wove in a melody I had heard once from an old Italian woman who lived below my grandmother. It was only half a lullaby, broken and unfinished, but the missing part had always bothered me. So I filled it in. My fingers had barely touched the final phrase when the room seemed to change behind me. Not the whole room, just one person in it. I felt him before I saw him. When the song ended, I looked up and found a man standing near the piano, dressed in black, broad shoulders still, dark eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made applause fade into a dull hum. "Where did you learn that song?" he asked. His voice was low, controlled, but something under it was not. "I didn't," I said. "Not properly. I heard half of it once." "And the rest?" The rest felt obvious. His eyes moved over my face like he was looking for mockery and did not find it. "Obvious," he repeated. "To you?" Music is mostly listening for what is missing. He did not smile, but the coldness around his mouth shifted. "And people?" I should have looked away. Men like him did not ask harmless questions. "People are harder," I said. "They hide missing things on purpose." That was the first time Alessio Romano looked at me as if I had touched something no one else knew was bruised. He hired me again the following week for a private dinner, then for a fundraiser, then for an evening at his family hotel. Always legitimate events, always public enough to be safe. He never flirted crudely, never crowded me, never threw money like bait. He asked about composers, about my music school, about why I chose children instead of concert halls. I told him concert. Halls were full of people who already knew how to listen. Children still believed sound could change the world. He told me, after the 4th event, that his mother had sung that lullaby when he was small. "She died before I learned all of it," he said. "You played the ending she never got to teach me." I did not know what to say to that. Then, "Maybe it was never mine," I said. "Maybe I was just returning it." He looked at me for a long time. "Be careful, Mira Valenti. Returning lost things is dangerous in my family." I learned who he was slowly, though the whispers came quickly. Alessio Romano, head of the Romano family's empire, owner of hotels, restaurants, construction firms, shipping interests, and other things no one named directly. A man with polished legal businesses and shadows that moved when he raised a hand. The first time I saw one of his men make a drunk investor apologize to a waitress without Alessio saying a word, I understood that power did not always need volume. The first time Alessio sent flowers to my music school with a note that said, "For the wall that still needs paint," I understood that power could also listen. I was not naive enough to think him safe. I was lonely enough to understand why danger felt different when it looked at you gently. His uncle Vincenzo watched me from the beginning. He was elegant in the way knives are elegant. Silver hair, soft voice, eyes that never warmed. At first he called me the pianist, then Miss Valenti. Then, once Alessio began bringing me to family dinners, he called me dear with a smile that made the word feel like a hand around my throat. "A gifted girl," he told Alessio one night, while I stood close enough to hear. "But gifts are not foundations." Alessio's reply was quiet. "Neither is blood when it rots." Vincenzo smiled. I should have been afraid then. I was, but love had already begun teaching fear to be polite. The marriage proposal came 3 months later in Alessio's private music room, not with roses, not with a ring at first, not with the kind of kneeling women are taught to expect. He stood beside the grand piano while rain moved down the windows and told me the truth in the only language he trusted. "My family wants a wife at my side." I laughed because I thought he was warning me away. Then they should find one. They have tried. And they brought me women who looked at my name before they looked at my face. I sat very still on the piano bench. "Why are you telling me?" "Because the board that manages my legitimate holdings is nervous. Old partners are nervous. The council is nervous. An unmarried man with no visible family looks temporary to people who need to believe in succession." That sounds like a business problem. It is. And I am not a business solution. "No," he said. "That is why I am asking instead of arranging." I looked at him then. Asking what? He opened a velvet box, but he did not move closer. Inside was a ring, old, beautiful, too heavy with history to be romantic in the simple way. "Marry me," he said, "not because this begins as love. I will not insult you with that lie. Marry me because I can give you protection, money for the school, a name that will make doors open, and a place beside me that no one in my family can dismiss as temporary." My throat tightened. And what do you get? A wife the world will respect. Because I play piano nicely at dinner parties? Because you hear what is missing. I looked at the ring, then at him. And if I say no, then I fund the school anyway and never ask again. That was the moment I began to believe him. Not because of the money, but because he had given me a door that opened both ways. I said yes 3 days later with my own conditions. My music school stayed in my name. I would not be hidden. I would not be touched unless I wanted to be. I would not become a decorative silence beside his chair. Alessio listened to every condition, then said, "Add one more." "What?" "If my world frightens you, you tell me before you run." I almost smiled. "Do men like you usually let women run?" "No," he said. "That is why I am learning the rule now." We married in a private ceremony under white flowers and security cameras disguised as chandeliers. The world saw a graceful pianist become the wife of a powerful man. Vincenzo saw a problem he believed would solve itself. I saw Alessio standing at the altar with a face so controlled, no one else noticed his hands were cold when they took mine. That night, in the bedroom prepared for us with cream silk sheets and too many candles, he did not touch me. He removed his jacket, sat in the armchair near the window, and looked more afraid than he had looked in any room full of armed men. "Mira," he said, "before this marriage asks anything from you, you deserve the truth." I stood beside the bed, still, wearing the white dress. "What truth?" His eyes lowered to his hands. "Years ago, I was injured in what my family called an accident. I was in the hospital for weeks. The doctors told me the damage was permanent. He swallowed once. I can never father a child. The room went still around us. Not awkward. Not empty. Grieving. Alessio kept speaking because stopping would have cost him more. If you wanted children, if you imagined a daughter at a piano or a son with your stubbornness, then I have already failed you before I have become your husband in any real way. I should have told you before the wedding. I was selfish enough to wait until you could still hate me privately. I walked toward him slowly. He did not look up until I knelt in front of his chair, the dress pooling around me like spilled moonlight. A child is not the only proof a woman was loved, I said. His jaw tightened. You say that because you are kind. No. I say it because I know what it feels like to be measured by one thing missing. He looked at me then, really looked, and some hard wall in him shifted. I cannot give you that life. Then do not promise me the life you cannot. Give, I said. Give me the truth. Tonight, that is enough. He touched my cheek with the back of his fingers, so lightly I could have imagined it. I do not know how to be gentle with what I want. Then start by not taking it. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, something had changed. We did not become lovers that night. We became something more fragile first, honest. The months that followed were not a fairy tale. Alessio's world did not soften because I entered it. Men still came to the house with secrets in their pockets. His phone still rang at midnight. His name still made rooms careful. But the music room became ours. At first he stood in the doorway while I played. Then he sat across the room. Then one night, while the city glittered beyond the windows and I was too tired to pretend I did not miss ordinary things, he sat beside me and placed his hands on the keys. My mother's song, I asked. Our song now, he said. Then played the lullaby slowly, imperfectly, with pauses where memory hurt him. This is the only soft thing my family never managed to take from me. I leaned my shoulder against his. Then we will keep it safe. Love did not arrive like lightning. It arrived like routines, his coffee beside mine. My music sheets stacked near his contracts. His hand at my lower back in public, not possessive, but present. My laughter surprising him. His smile surprising me. The first time he kissed me, he asked with his eyes before his mouth moved, and I understood then that powerful men could be taught reverence if they were brave enough to be ashamed of their hunger. The marriage became real quietly, then completely. I stopped counting the reasons it had begun and started fearing the cost of how deeply it had grown. Vincenzo noticed. He noticed everything. You have made him sentimental, he told me at a family luncheon while Alessio spoke with investors across the room. No, I said. I think he already was. You just called it weakness. His smile did not change. Careful, dear. A woman who mistakes softness for safety often loses both. 2 weeks later, I held a pregnancy test in the private bathroom of Alessio's suite and watched 2 pink lines appear. For a moment, I forgot every fear I had ever known. I laughed once, a broken, disbelieving sound, then covered my mouth with both hands because joy felt too loud for that house. My first thought was Alessio, not the Mafia boss, not the Romano name. Alessio in the armchair on our wedding night, confessing a wound he believed no love could heal. Alessio at the piano, calling the lullaby ours. Alessio sleeping with one hand open on the sheet between us, as if even in dreams he was afraid to hold too tightly. A child. His child. Our child. Then terror followed joy so quickly it felt like the same emotion wearing another face. Every paper in Alessio's life said this was impossible. Every doctor, every scar, every family whisper had trained him to believe fatherhood was a room he could never enter. What would happen when I told him? Would his first breath be happiness or suspicion? Would he believe me before the world around him told him not to? I decided I would tell him that night, alone, in the music room, with the piano between us like a place where truth had always been safe. But I made the mistake of confirming it with the family doctor first. Dr. Santoro had been with the Romanos for 20 years, a thin man with silver glasses and hands too smooth for a doctor who claimed to care about bodies. He congratulated me with a smile that did not reach his eyes, took blood, asked dates, and told me to rest. By the time I returned to the mansion, Vincenzo was waiting in Alessio's office. He sat behind Alessio's desk as if he had always expected to own the chair. A folder lay open in front of him. "Mira," he said softly. "Close the door." I did not. "Where is Alessio?" "At a board dinner. Unreachable for the next hour. Long enough for you to understand the difference between a miracle and a scandal." My hand went instinctively to my stomach. His eyes followed. "There. It is, the mother's gesture. How quickly women become predictable." "I am telling my husband tonight." Vincenzo sighed as if I had disappointed him. "Are you?" He turned the folder toward me. The first page was Alessio's medical report. I had seen the pain this report had caused, but I had never seen the report itself. Permanent reproductive trauma. Natural conception highly unlikely. Later pages carried signatures, scans, old hospital stamps. "Alessio believes this," Vincenzo said, "because it was written by doctors, confirmed by specialists, and carved into his body by pain. You will walk in with a pregnancy and ask him to believe what? That love-corrected medicine? The report can be wrong. Reports are believed before waitresses, pianists, and inconvenient wives. He will believe me." Vincenzo's smile thinned. "He may want to. That is not the same thing. And even if he does, the council will not. Romano blood is not announced. It is verified, protected, contained." He slid another document forward. "Family Legitimacy Protocol," I read. Only pieces at first, because fear made the words swim. Maternal separation during dispute, protective custody of potential heir, reputation management. "What is this?" My voice sounded far away. "Old family law, dressed in modern legal language. If the child is his, the child belongs to Romano blood. If the child is not his, you belong to scandal. Either way, you do not keep him." "You cannot do that." "Not in a nursery," he said. "Not with shouting, but in courtrooms, in private clinics, with social workers paid by foundations and judges who attend our charity dinners." "My dear, the world takes children from women every day and calls it procedure." I felt the room tilt. He placed a third file on top. Photographs, not real ones, but convincing enough. A man leaving my music school, a forged hotel receipt, a drafted headline. "Pianist wife traps Romano boss with another man's child." "You made this already," I whispered. "I prepare for possibilities." "Why?" For the first time, his polite mask cracked, just enough for contempt to show. "Because Alessio, without an heir, keeps the future open. My son Marco has been raised for responsibility. Alessio's son would end that. You did this because of succession. I did this because families survive through planning, not romance. You are talking about a baby. I am talking about a chair men die wanting." There, it was, the truth stripped bare, not war, not enemies, greed with a family name, control wearing a silk tie. Vincenzo stood. "You will leave tonight, quietly. You will write a note. You will not mention the pregnancy. If you contact Alessio, if you write one letter, make one call, register one hospital form under his name, I will know where the child is. And once, I know, the council will know." My hands shook. "He will look for me." "For a while," Vincenzo said. "And then he will read your note. He will remember what he cannot give you. And he will do the one noble thing left to a broken man. He will let you go." I hated him then with a purity I did not know existed, but hate could not protect a heartbeat. That night, I wrote the hardest lie of my life because truth would have given Vincenzo a map. Do not look for me. If you ever loved me, let me leave with the only dignity I have left. I left the note on the piano bench. I pressed my hand once, to the keys, but did not play. If I played, I would have stayed. A woman from a charity network I had worked with through my music school drove me out through a service gate. Her name was Sister Agnes, though she wore jeans under her coat and swore at red lights. Years earlier, Alessio's mother had quietly funded shelters for women who needed to disappear without becoming police reports. That hidden kindness saved me from the family that carried her name. I became Mira Bennett 3 states away. I stopped performing because music left footprints. I stopped using bank accounts that could be followed. I worked cash jobs, cleaned houses, folded sheets at a motel, and finally found Rosie's diner, where Rosie looked at my swollen belly, my empty wallet, and my terrified eyes and said, "I pay under the table until you're ready to tell me your real name, or never. I don't care which." Leo was born during a thunderstorm with one fist beside his face, and Alessio's frown already waiting between his brows. I did not cry when he came out. I laughed. Then I cried for 3 days. I sang him the lullaby because it was the only piece of his father I could give him without risking his life. When he was 2, he asked why he did not have a daddy. I told him some people come from love, even when love cannot stay in the room. When he was 4, he asked why his eyes were not like mine. I told him he had eyes from a song. He accepted that because children forgive poetry more easily than adults forgive truth. I thought Alessio had not looked for me. I thought the note had hurt him enough to let me vanish. I did not know until the night at Rosie's that he had searched. I did not know Vincenzo had placed him in a hospital the night I fled, claiming complications from his old injury, keeping him sedated for 2 days while false trails were built around my absence. I did not know Alessio woke to my note, security footage of me leaving with a suitcase, a bank withdrawal made in my name, witnesses who swore I had spoken of wanting a normal life and children, and private investigators whose reports Vincenzo edited before they reached his hands. I did not know Alessio searched for 6 months until my handwriting became a wall he would not break. I did not know that on our first anniversary after I left, he returned to the music room, found the piano covered, and stood there until morning without touching a key. I did not know that on my birthday, he sent flowers to the school above the bakery even after the school had closed, and when they came back undelivered, he finally locked the music room because every note in it sounded like my leaving. I only knew what survival allowed me to know. Silence kept Leo breathing in my arms. In the diner storage room 6 years later, all of that stood between us, invisible and crowded. Alessio returned to booth 7 after our first conversation, but he did not leave town. Of course he did not. He paid for his untouched coffee, left bills under the mug large enough to cover a month of Rosie's rent, and asked Rosie if the inn across the road had rooms. Rosie told him the inn had mice and bad plumbing. He said he had stayed in worse. I doubted that, but he stayed anyway. For 3 days he came to the diner at the same time, sat in the same booth, ordered coffee he rarely drank, and did not approach Leo unless Leo approached him first. That restraint unsettled me more than force would have. Leo, of course, adored him immediately. Children are drawn to adults who take them seriously, and Alessio listened to Leo explain things as if the future of nations depended on dinosaurs, pancakes, and why red crayons were faster than blue ones. Mr. Movie Man, Leo called him. The second morning, because Alessio still had not given his name, and Leo had decided titles were flexible. "Did you know some people put syrup on eggs?" Alessio looked genuinely disturbed. "That should be illegal." Leo nodded solemnly. "I knew you were smart." I dropped a fork behind the counter and had to turn away so neither of them would see my face. On the third morning, Leo informed him that his tie was too serious. Alessio looked down at the dark silk. "Ties can be serious? Yours is." "What should it be?" "Yellow." Alessio paused. "I do not own a yellow tie." Leo sighed like he had discovered a tragic flaw in a hero. "You should fix that." The next morning, Alessio arrived without a tie at all. Leo inspected him and said, "Better." Alessio accepted the judgment with solemn dignity, and I had to escape into the kitchen before the ache in my chest became visible. Each tiny scene hurt me in a new way. Not because it was wrong, but because it was natural. Because my son had begun making room for his father without knowing what he was doing. Because Alessio, who had once believed no child could carry his face, watched Leo, with hunger carefully disguised as patience. On the fourth evening, when rain had returned and the diner was nearly empty, Leo found the old upright piano against the back wall. It had been there longer than Rosie, out of tune and mostly decorative, with a jar of plastic flowers on top. Leo climbed onto the bench and pressed a few keys. "Careful," I called from the counter. "It bites." "Pianos don't bite." "This one might." Alessio looked up from booth 7. Leo turned toward him. "Do you know songs?" Alessio's face went still in a way I recognized too late. "A few." "Mama knows the sleepy song." My hands froze around the rag. "Leo." But he was already tapping the keys, searching, not playing well. Just finding the shape of the melody with one finger. 3 notes. A pause. The beginning of the lullaby. Alessio stood so suddenly his chair scraped back. Leo stopped. "Did I do it wrong?" Alessio did not answer him at first. His eyes found mine across the diner, and this time the question in them was no longer only grief over another man. It was possibility, and possibility terrified me more than pain. "Who taught you that?" he asked Leo, though he was looking at me. Leo smiled. "Mama sings it when I can't sleep." Face could be coincidence, timing could be cruelty. But that song had belonged to Alessio's mother, then to Alessio, then to me, then to Leo. It had not traveled by accident. Alessio walked to the piano slowly, as if approaching something holy or wounded. "May I?" he asked Leo. Leo slid over to make room. Alessio sat beside him, large and dark and impossibly careful, then placed his hands on the old keys. The first notes were distorted because the piano was out of tune. The second notes were right enough to break me. Leo's eyes widened. "You know Mama's song." Alessio's voice was rough. "Yes. You play it sadder. I learned it that way. Mama sings it soft. She always did." Leo looked between us, confused now, but not afraid. Alessio finished the phrase and let the last broken note fade. Then he stood and turned to me. "Storage room," he said. "Please." The please nearly ruined me. Rosie took one look at my face and took Leo into the kitchen for ice cream. In the storage room, Alessio did not wait for me to speak. "That song was ours." My back touched the shelf behind me. "No, Alessio." It became his. He inhaled as if I had struck him. "Is there any chance?" I closed my eyes. "Do not ask unless you want the answer." I have wanted the answer since he pointed at me. "No," I whispered. "You wanted the answer only after the song." "Mira." His voice broke on my name barely, but enough. "Is he mine?" I had carried the truth for 6 years. I had imagined saying it in anger, in fear, in court, in a letter I burned, in prayers I stopped believing someone heard. I had never imagined saying it beside shelves of canned peaches while my son ate ice cream in a diner kitchen. "He was always yours," I said. Alessio did not move. The color seemed to leave his face from the inside. "Always," he repeated. "Yes." He reached for the shelf, not for me, and gripped it until the metal creaked. "You let me believe." His voice failed, then returned colder because cold was the only way he knew to survive breaking. "You let me believe you had another man's child." "No," I said, tears spilling now. "Your family taught you to believe you could never have your own." His eyes lifted to mine. I told him everything. The pregnancy test, Dr. Santoro, Vincenzo in his office, the medical report, the scandal file, the custody clause, the threat that one call would bring the counsel to my child before he was even born. I told him how I wrote the note because Vincenzo's men were watching. I told him how I left because the Romano name had become a net, and I could not tell which threads belonged to him and which belonged to men who wanted my baby as blood before. They saw him as a child. Alessio listened without interrupting. By the end, he looked like a man standing in the ashes of a house he had believed empty, discovering someone had been living inside when it burned. "You should have trusted me," he said. "I trusted you as a man," I answered. "I did not trust the family that could make you prove your own child in front of a council." That landed. He looked away. "I searched," he said after a long silence. "I know that now." "No. You need to know it from me. I searched until your note became the only boundary I had left that still sounded like your voice. I searched until every lead came back poisoned. I searched until Vincenzo looked me in the eyes and told me love is not always enough for a woman who wants a child. I believed him because the lie fit the wound he had helped create." His voice grew quieter. "I hated you for leaving. Then I hated myself for not being enough. Then I stopped playing because every song asked where you had gone." I covered my mouth. "Alessio." He shook his head. "No. Do not pity me. I had power, and still did not see the cage around us. You had nothing but a heartbeat to protect, and you survived." He looked toward the door, where faintly we could hear Leo laughing at something Rosie had said. "Does he know?" "No." "Then he hears it from us. Not from my name. Not from a lawyer. Not from some old man using blood like a leash. And Vincenzo?" Alessio's eyes changed, not loud, not reckless, cold in the way justice becomes when it has waited years. Now I look for the truth properly. The first thing Alessio did was not take Leo from me. That mattered. He did not demand a blood test in front of my son, did not send men to stand outside Rosie's apartment, did not announce himself as father because blood finally gave him permission. He rented the inn room for another week, then another. He met Leo only when I allowed it. He brought no gifts except a small box of crayons because Leo had used his red one down to a stub. "Can I call you Mr. Movie Man still?" Leo asked. Alessio looked at me first. I nodded. "Yes," he said, "for now." "Do you have kids?" Leo asked one afternoon, coloring a dinosaur with 3 heads. Alessio's hand stilled. "I did not think I did." Leo considered this. "That is a weird answer." "Yes," Alessio said softly. "It is." While Leo slept in Rosie's apartment above the diner, Alessio and I sat across from each other in the closed dining room and built the map of 6 stolen years. He asked for names, dates, documents, phrases Vincenzo had used. He did not ask me to relive more than I could bear in one night. When my voice failed, he waited. When I cried, he passed me napkins from the dispenser and looked away enough to let me keep my dignity. "I am not fragile," I told him once, ashamed of how my hands shook. "No," he said. "You are tired." By the end of the week, Alessio had found the retired nurse who remembered Vincenzo standing outside surgery and insisting certain language be included in the report. He found payment records to Dr. Santoro through a shell charity. He found scans that did not match the final diagnosis. The accident itself, once called a brake failure, had been staged by a driver linked not to rivals, not to any war, but to a company Vincenzo controlled through his wife's cousin. The goal had not been to kill Alessio. Killing him would have thrown the family into chaos too early. The goal had been crueler. Leave him alive, powerful, ashamed, and heirless. Dr. Santoro broke after Alessio brought him face to face with the nurse and the original scans. I was not in the room, but Alessio told me later because he said I deserved every truth that had been used to cage me. The injury was real, Santoro had said, sweating through his collar. The conclusion was exaggerated. I was told the family needed certainty. "Certainty," Alessio had repeated. "You gave me a life sentence. I was paid." "No," Alessio said. "You were bought. There is a difference only people with souls understand. Santoro signed a confession. Vincenzo called a council anyway. That was his arrogance. He believed shame could outlive proof. The Romano estate looked exactly as I remembered and nothing like home. Iron gates, cypress trees, white stone steps, windows tall enough to reflect, the sky and cold enough to keep it out. I arrived with Alessio and Leo in the same car because I refused to let my son enter that house as cargo. Leo wore a navy sweater, held my hand, and looked around with wide eyes. "Is this a castle?" he whispered. "No," I said. "It's just a big house." Alessio on his other side said, "Your mother is right." Leo looked up at him. "Do you live here?" "Sometimes." "It has too many windows." "I agree. You need curtains." "I will consider it." "Blue ones." "Of course." That tiny conversation kept me from falling apart on the steps. Inside, the council had gathered in the old dining hall, a room of dark wood, oil portraits, and men who believed age made their greed respectable. Vincenzo stood near the head of the table with Marco behind him. Marco looked uncomfortable, older than I remembered, handsome in a softer way than his father, his eyes avoiding mine. Vincenzo smiled when he saw my waitress coat folded over my arm. I had worn a simple black dress, my hair pinned neatly, no diamonds. My hands were bare except for the wedding ring I had kept hidden in a tin box for 6 years and put back on, that morning with shaking fingers. I wanted them to see Mira Romano, not the disguise they had forced me to wear. "Mira," Vincenzo said warmly. "Or do you prefer Bennett now?" Alessio's hand moved slightly, but I touched his wrist. My fight. Vincenzo saw and smiled wider. How moving. The runaway wife returns with a child and already remembers where to place her hand. I looked at him without lowering my eyes. "I remember everything." "Good. Then you remember leaving this house voluntarily." "I remember being shown a file that turned my pregnancy into a scandal before my son had a heartbeat." A murmur moved through the room. Vincenzo lifted a brow. "Such dramatic language. You were always a musician. And you were always a man who thought quiet cruelty looked like manners." His smile thinned. "You hid Romano blood for 6 years. I hid a child from men who called him blood before they called him alive. The boy belongs to this family. He belongs to himself before he belongs to any name." One of the older men cleared his throat. "Mrs. Romano, if the child is indeed Alessio's—" "He is," Alessio said. He placed the DNA result on the table. "And before any of you decide that gives you rights over him, you will hear why he was hidden." Vincenzo laughed softly. "A love story, then." "A crime," Alessio said. He laid down Santoro's confession. Then the original scans. Then the payment records. Then the accident report. Each page landed like a door locking. Vincenzo's face changed only once, when he saw the driver's company record. Marco stepped forward. "Father?" Vincenzo did not look at him. "This is emotional theater." "No," Alessio said. "Theater has music." His voice dropped. "This is evidence." Marco picked up one page with shaking fingers. "You said the accident was a rival message." "Put that down," Vincenzo snapped. Marco did not. His face had gone pale. "I heard you say once an airless boss is easier to replace. I thought you meant politically." He looked at Alessio, then at Leo standing beside me, small and silent, and watching adults become monsters in suits. "I did not know you made him airless." The room went silent. Vincenzo's control cracked. "You foolish boy." Alessio's eyes hardened. "Do not speak to him. You have used enough sins." Vincenzo looked at Leo then, and something possessive entered his face. "That child changes nothing. He is 5. He can be raised properly." I stepped in front of Leo before Alessio moved. My voice was calm, which surprised even me. "You will never use the word raised about my son. Vincenzo's eyes slid over me. You were a pianist when you wanted applause, a wife when you wanted power, and a waitress when hiding became useful. I felt Alessio's rage beside me, but I did not need it. I became a waitress because aprons made better disguises than diamonds, I said. But I was his wife before you turned my child into a case file. Leo tugged my hand. Mama? I knelt immediately. It's okay. Why is everyone mad? I looked at Alessio. The moment we had delayed had arrived in the worst room possible, surrounded by the wrong people, but Leo deserved truth before the family could turn it into ceremony. Alessio stepped closer, then stopped, asking me with his eyes. I nodded once. Leo noticed the grand piano in the corner then, half hidden under a white dust cloth. There's a piano. Children survive unbearable rooms by finding the one thing they understand. He walked toward it before anyone could stop him, lifted the cloth and pressed one key. It rang out dull but alive. Then he tapped the first notes of the lullaby. The room changed, not because the council understood the song, but because Alessio did. He crossed the room slowly and sat beside Leo on the bench. May I? Leo nodded. Alessio played the next phrase. Leo looked up, amazed. You know Mama's song? Alessio's throat moved. Yes. Are you the man from Mama's song? Every person in the room seemed to disappear for me except the three of us. My son, his father, and the melody that had carried us through every lie. Alessio looked at me again. I nodded, tears burning my eyes. He lowered himself from the bench, to one knee in front of Leo. Powerful men had knelt in that house to no one. Alessio Romano knelt to a 5-year-old boy with a serious frown and a song in his hands. Yes, he said. I am the man from your mother's song. Leo studied him. Are you my dad? Alessio closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, he did not look like a boss. He looked like a man praying he would not break the gift in front of him. I am your father, he said, but being your father is not something I get to demand. It is something I will spend my life earning if you and your mother allow me. Leo thought about that with the solemnity of almost 6. Do dads know how to make pancakes? A sound escaped Alessio that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. I can learn. Leo nodded. Okay, you can start with triangles. That was how the Romano Council ended. Not with blood, not with war, with a child setting terms for pancakes, while grown men realized the future they had argued over had a voice of his own. Vincenzo was removed before sunset. His accounts were frozen, his confession unnecessary after Santoro's, Marco's statement, and the documents Alessio had gathered. Dr. Santoro lost more than his license. He lost the protection that had made him brave enough to lie. Marco did not become an ally overnight, but he did not defend his father. Sometimes the first moral act is silence in the right direction. Alessio made one announcement to the council before we left. No one claims my son before his mother feels safe. No one approaches him without her permission. No one speaks of blood as if it outranks the woman who kept him alive. Then he turned to me. Not them. Where do you want to go? That question undid me more than any declaration could have. Not come home. Not stay here. Not you belong with me. Where do you want to go? I did not move back into the mansion. I could not. Love does not erase the shape of a cage just because the door opens. Alessio bought a small house near the edge of the city, close enough for safety, far enough for breath, and put it in my name before I agreed to step inside. No locks I do not control, I told him. Already changed, he said, and handed me every key. He visited Leo every day at first, then every other day when I asked for space, then daily again because Leo complained that pancake training was being delayed. He learned school pickup. He learned bedtime stories should not include revenge. He learned that Leo hated peas, but would eat broccoli if it was called little trees. He learned to sit in the audience at kindergarten music day without making the other parents feel like they were attending a sentencing. He did not ask me to forgive him quickly. He did not ask me to be his wife again in practice, just because papers said I still was. At night, after Leo slept, we sat on the porch and let the silence learn us again. I don't know how to return to a life that almost swallowed him, I said once. Alessio looked out at the small yard where Leo had left a toy truck in the grass. Then don't return. You say that like it's simple. No. I say it because it is difficult and still true. He turned to me. Build a new life. Tell me where I am allowed to stand. And if some days I don't know, then I stand farther back. That was how love returned. Not as a storm, not as a command, as distance respected, as apologies, repeated without being asked, as a dangerous man learning that protection without choice is only another cage. 3 months later, I reopened my music school in a sunlit storefront between a bakery and a laundromat. The sign read, Valenti Music. House, and beneath it, in smaller letters, Leo insisted on adding songs for people with and without dads. Alessio stared at the sign for a long time when he saw it. He added that, I said quickly. I know, Alessio said. It is honest. The first recital was small. 10 children, folding chairs, cookies from the bakery, Rosie in the front, Ro crying before anyone played. Leo wore a white shirt with one button wrong and sat beside Alessio at the piano. Together, they played the lullaby badly, beautifully, with Leo rushing the easy notes, and Alessio slowing down to follow him. No one in the room knew what the song had survived. Maybe that was why it sounded free. After the recital, when the chairs were stacked and Leo had fallen asleep in Rosie's lap with cookie crumbs on his shirt, Alessio and I stood by the piano in the quiet. The first time I lost you, he said, I thought I was letting you choose a life I could not give you. I touched the edge of the keys, and I thought leaving was the only way our son would ever be free. He was silent for a moment. Do you still want to be free of me? I looked at him then, at the man who had once married me for reputation and learned to love me in music, at the husband who had been robbed of fatherhood by a lie, at the father who had knelt before his son and asked for permission to earn what blood had already given him. No, I said. I want to be free with you. His breath caught. He did not reach for me until I stepped closer. When his arms came around me, they did not feel like a claim. They felt like a door left open. The first time my son told a stranger he looked like him, I thought my past had found us to destroy us. I did not know it had come back wounded, betrayed, and ready to kneel beside the child it had been told could never exist. And I did not know that sometimes the life you bury returns not to drag you backward but to ask softly if you are finally ready to come home.